one more thing about the economy. We can draw a diagram of the whole economy. We have the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply. It's like a market equilibrium, like we saw in the supply and demand. When these two curves join at the center, the intercept is called the equilibrium. At that equilibrium, we can determine the GDP of the country and the price level of the country. And we can then decide, is that GDP all we can do, or could we do more? But it opens the argument, and it enables us to do all kind of measurements and see what happens if, for example, if the curves start to move, and the demand moves one way or another, and the supply moves one way or another, how would it affect the equilibrium? Let's say there is increased supply because we have better technology. Well, then the AS curve will move to the right. Our prices will go down, and there will be more production. If, on the contrary, there is a catastrophe and supply declines, let's say an earthquake that devastates parts of the country, well, the AS curve, the aggregate supply curve, will shift to the left. In that case, prices will go up, and the GDP will go down. And then we have the demand. What if there is a surge in demand? There is a frenzy of consumerism. Well, then the demand curve will move to the right, prices will go up, and the GDP will go up, which may be a good thing, but if it is too much, it can cause inflation. It's called demand pull inflation. What happens if there is a shift in the cost of certain materials, let's say oil? Well, then that can affect the supply curve. The aggregate supply curve may shift to the left because of the increase in the oil prices. That's called cost push inflation. But this kind of inflation phenomenon are very, very short term. They will not last for a long time, maybe months or years, but eventually they will go back to the normal point. Cost push and demand pull inflation are temporary phenomena. But what happens with inflation of the monetary type? That's when too much money is in circulation. If the government does not control the quantity of money, you have monetary inflation. So inflation becomes a monetary phenomenon because the value of the money goes down, and that can last for a long time. And the Federal Reserve job is to avoid that. But when we use this graph of the aggregate supply and aggregate demand, we can do certain predictions, like any good model can, about where the economy is heading. And we'll look at that later in the class.